Alrighty, welcome back guys to another Rainbow Six Extraction operator video, and today we're going to be going over Lion. One of the very last operators that we're going to be going over. We have him, IQ to go over, and Sophia finally got her up to level 10, so I'll be going over her in a little bit after this episode, but let's go ahead and jump in with Lion and everything he does. So again, we're going to go over his arsenal, his primary, secondary weapon, his advancements. As this is going to be going through level 1 through 10. All of his upgrades that he gets along the way, his stats being speed and armor, his main gadget, and his passive ability. And we'll be going over that. It's more going to be the more interesting part of his whole deal, but I'll be going over the loadout and stuff first. I want to mostly just stay in the main menu. Not going to show any kind of gameplay because he does have a pretty wide selection of arsenal selections here and a bunch of attachments that go along with the guns. So it's going to be taking up a little bit too much time. So I want to make it to where I want to be cutting it a little bit short and not actually showing any kind of gameplay. Luckily, the game does have previews of the gadget working in games, so I'll go ahead and show you guys that. And you can obviously, spend time and play with them on your own if you want to. But I'm just going to give like the general idea on how he's supposed to be played and what kind of role he fits in. So let's go ahead and get started with the primaries. Now he actually has a really solid primary right off the bat, and this is the V308 assault rifle. So it is the Vector, or the Chris Vector platform or body, kind of extended with a longer barrel, and it shoots, I believe, either 308 rounds. That's why it has like the 308 in the name, or it's 5.56, but I could be mistaken. I'm not entirely sure, but it does hit hard at a solid 44 damage. Without a suppressor. With a suppressor, it does 26, which is actually still really high. So it doesn't really drop a whole lot of damage with the suppressor. So even with the suppressor, it actually is really solid. So you can run that. It's pretty flexible when it comes to that. I will say the fire rate on this gun, it is a little bit faster than being like in a really slow area of like 600 and something rounds, but it has 700 rounds per minute, a solid just normal line there. So it's not extremely slow, but it's not really fast either. And really all around, it makes it to where that it shoots fast enough to where you're still able to kill enemies pretty fast, and it is pretty forgiving if you miss one or two shots. But it's also slow enough for you to actually control your recoil way better, because I mean there's a little bit of an extra time for you to actually pull down and adjust for recoil as it kicks. So it's really solid when it comes to recoil control, despite it looking like it kind of bounces left and right a little bit more from the recoil pattern. It's really easy to control, so I wouldn't worry about that a whole lot. So I actually build it a little bit differently. So you have the compensator that helps out with the orange and red part of the recoil pattern, so the later ends of the gun recoil. Even though this gun does have a lower rate of fire, so it does take a little bit of time for it to actually reach that orange and red spot of the recoil. So chances are you wouldn't really be normally running into that a whole lot unless you're shooting out a bunch of enemies at once that are attacking you in like waves. But for stealth play and like just shooting at a couple of enemies at a time, which normally you would be playing through, that's normally how the game is going to be playing out. You don't really need a compensator because you won't really be leading into that kind of area where you're actually using the or getting into the later ends of the recoil pattern to where you're just going to keep kicking harder and harder. So for this, I recommend running a muzzle brake. Helps out with the blue and yellow part, or the more like early on stages of the recoil, so you're able to get those 2 to 3 shots off faster or more accurately. So I'd run that on there. The sights on here actually has a solid selection of sights. So you have the standard reflex, the standard holographic, and standard red dot. I use the red dot on there. It takes up as little room as possible, and in my opinion, has a little bit of a better, little reticle compared to like the green triangle from the reflex sight. It also has a 2.5 times scope and a 2 times scope if you want to extend the range a little bit more. I recommend putting on the 2 times scope because it is a little bit longer on the gun. However, it doesn't take up as much actual visible space, either by like shooting from the hip or actually having it in the view of shooting from the hip or aiming down sights. As you can see, the scope on here is a little bit larger when it comes towards like the very end, so it does take up a little bit more space if you run the ACOG. So if you are going to go longer ranges, I just recommend running 2 times. It's more than enough zoom anyway. The actual grips, you have the vertical grip that help out with more for recoil control, and that's all around the board. It's supposed to be better. But I don't really recommend running that again because this gun is already really good when it comes to fire rate. The recoil control is already really manageable to use. So I recommend running the angle grip so you're able to aim down sights faster. And all around it's just a bit of a different build, and it's really a solid gun. You really can't go wrong with it, especially with it having a 50 round drum magazine. So really starting off strong with his first primary. His second gun is the HK417, one of the best DMRs in the game. The damage is at a memeable 69 damage per shot. Nice. And I believe it's 41, yeah, so 41 damage with the suppressor. So you could still run the suppressor on there and still hit like a truck. Marksman rifles are supposed to be like almost flexible in every single category, so it works out really well. So if you want to run the suppressor, you can. You won't really be losing out on a whole lot of damage output. I'll run the muzzle brake on there because if I'm going loud, I might as well use a loud gun. There's no reason for me to dampen my damage when I'm already being shot at or attacked by a bunch of enemies. With the DMR, you know, for it being kind of a gun that's for longer ranges, it has the entire spectrum of all magnifications to the gun. Not every single sight, but every single magnification to it. So you have the standard reflex sight, the standard holographic, the standard red dot sight. You have the 1.5 times zoom scope, which I would probably run that or a 2 times scope because it is a marksman rifle. I do like to have a little bit extra magnification, but not by a whole lot, or it's going to be a little bit zooming in a bit too far just for how the maps are laid out. So it's either 1.5 times or 2 times is that good sweet spot you want to find there. But you also have the ACOG, the 2.5 times zoom, or you actually have the exclusive 3 times scope, which I believe is only on the DMRs right now. So that is something, if you want to put that on there, you can look pretty much across the map with this thing, and it looks pretty cool. I don't really use it very often, though. It does have a great reticle to it as well, so it is really clean. So if you want to use it, you can. Going on, and it only has one grip, so the vertical grip. You just run that. It just helps out with more recoil. This gun, combined with the muzzle brake, has next to no recoil to it. So it is a DMR that does 69 damage, shoots fairly fast, second the fastest from the other DMR, the EBR 14, I believe. Is the thing that shoots faster here, and also has a capacity of 20 rounds or 21 rounds, and if you count the one in the chamber. So it actually has a solid ammo capacity for a DMR that hits this hard, so you really can't go wrong. It's one of the greater guns in the game, and a solid choice all around. It's not bad at all to be using. The shotgun, this is this SG-CQB shotgun. It's one of the pump action shotguns that shoot a little bit faster just for the animation of pumping it or racking another shell in. And it's, you know, it doesn't have a suppressor option to it, so you will be trading off a little bit of stealth play for more utility. Obviously, it being a shotgun, it has a real steep drop off in damage, so you can only really do a large amount of lethality up close. It's an absolute stopping power machine up close, but outside of that, it's not really good at all. You don't even get any kind of hits or anything on there. The capacity is at a sad 8 rounds, or 8 or 7 shells, I guess. I think it would be 8 if you count the one already in the gun. It does do the most amount of damage than any other shotgun, only by 3 extra damage, but it has 50 damage. The SASG, or the Sausage 12 shotgun, the semi-automatic shotgun that Fuse and Finka and Tachanka all use, it does 50 damage, but it has way less of a effective damage range, so this shotgun is in a good sweet spot of having a better solid range, way more damage, and having the same utility as any other shotgun, aside from having a suppressor. Along with this, though, you know, it has the sights to it. Since it is a shotgun, it's real selective on sight, so you have standard reflex, red dot sight, and holographic. You don't need anything zoomed in for longer ranges because this gun doesn't have any kind of longer range option to it when it comes to effectiveness. And you also have the vertical grip, which you use for recoil control, and that's really about it. So pretty straightforward. Use that, the clear sprawl, pop open holes in walls, break down doors, anything like that you really need Shotguns are a good option. They just require a different type of play style. It's usually best paired with a secondary that's more like an SMG or a small secondary SMG. But going on, one of the more fun guns in his entire category. It's not really the greatest one, but it's more fun to use because it just feels good. But it's the F2 or the FAMAS and fully automatic, not in Modern Warfare 3-round burst. But in this gun, it does a really solid, without a suppressor anyway, it does a solid 37 damage, which is surprising to see because it also has a fire rate of 980 rounds per minute, which is the second fastest firing primary in the game. The fastest firing primary right now is the Scorpion Evo, and that's on Zofia and Ella, and that's an SMG, so this thing hits way harder, almost having the same amount of fire rate, but also hits harder as well, so it's the better Scorpion Evo. The only thing it really lacks in the whole thing is the 40 round capacity that the Scorpion Evo has. This thing only is at 30 rounds, or 31 if you count it. Count the one in the chamber, but that's really hardly anything. And it's also way better when it comes to actual recoil control compared to the Scorpion. So all around, it's more of a laser beam. So it is controllable. It is a lot bouncier than other guns, so you do need to put in a little bit of effort in order to actually control it a bit. But it's not near as bad as the Scorpion or anything like that. So all around, it's really fun to use. You can't really go wrong with it. So for this build, I'd absolutely recommend running the compensator on here. You'll very quickly reach the later ends of the recoil in the orange and red spots, since it does have such a fast fire rate to it. So yeah, compensator is a no-brainer. The muzzle brake is near useless if you do that. With a suppressor, it does a solid 22 damage, so it's not the greatest with the suppressor on, but it's not the worst either. So I recommend just running that on there. Kind of helps you out a little bit. The suppressor isn't really the worst option in the world for it. For scopes, it's also pretty minimal. It has a reflex sight, the red dot sight, and the standard holographic. With the 1.5 times scope, I run the slightly longer range scope on there for this, and the grips, you only have a vertical grip on there, so I only run that. And it's a pretty straightforward gun. Like I said, it's more of a more fun gun just to be melting people. It feels really good when you actually play it up close. It's like a heavier SMG in a weird sense. But yeah, so that's all his primaries. All of them are really solid in their own way there. The more guns that I really recommend using is either the F2, which you unlock at the very end or near the very end of his leveling, or you use the V308. So those two are really good. If you want more utility, it really just calls for what kind of situation you want to be playing. But yeah, the V308 or the F2 would be great because you can keep up a good constant rate of fire with the 50 round mag while doing 44 damage per shot. This thing just melts people or aliens in less than a second. It drops them right then and there. Now, secondary. So he does have a little bit of a selection of secondaries here. So he has the revolver, or the LFP586, a really long name for just calling it a revolver. This gun is interesting in its own category, but I don't necessarily use it very often because it has a lot of drawbacks to it, but it is kind of fun just to meme around and use the gun. It does a extremely good damage at 78 damage per shot. It is a cylinder. It is a revolver at the end of the day, so it does have a cylinder of only 6 rounds that you're able to load in at a time. You don't get any more or any less than that. And so it is a little bit poor when it comes to constant fire rate, and it is a lot slower firing than other handguns or anything like that. But it does hit like a truck. You can't run any kind of attachments to it, though, so you can't run a suppressor, can't run a scope. So it is supposed to be more or less like a pocket sniper rifle in a weird sense, but it's not really the best in any kind of way, since you can't even customize it for it to be effective at longer ranges. So normally when I run guns, as you'll see for most of my actual operator builds, I usually run my primaries without a suppressor on. 9 times out of 10 I'll be using my secondary with a suppressor, and I use that to sneak around and get headshots and weak points and things like that, again, around enemies. And when I do get spotted, I switch to my gun and have the most amount of effectiveness out of it, when dropping enemies around me if we get into a hot situation. So the the revolver isn't really meant around for that. So this is just the way I play. So it doesn't really have any kind of options for a suppressor, like I said. So I don't typically run it, but you can run it if you want to. If you want to put a suppressor or something on your other primary, or again if you just want to meme around with it. So I'm sure there is some type of utility you can use out of this, but I haven't really found it being great in many instances. So it's not really worth it in my opinion. So I really just go for the P9. It is one of the better handguns in the game. It does a solid 45 damage by default, and 27 with a suppressor. Usually it doesn't really matter on how much your secondary does, because you normally want to be aiming for headshots and weak points and stuff to be stealthy. So I don't ever really use it for just outright trying to kill a bunch of enemies at once unless I'm trying to get myself killed. So it doesn't really matter a whole lot on damage, but it does do a solid 27 damage per shot with a suppressor, which is really great. You can also have the muzzle brake on there to help out with recoil a little bit, but it is semi-automatic and a handgun, so the recoil already by default is extremely low, so you don't need to worry about that a whole lot. So I just run it with a suppressor, and that's almost always a go-to, so it's really straightforward on there. So that's his entire loadout, and overall, I mean, he's really flexible, and he actually has a really decent selection of guns. So let's go over his advancements and his ability and all that kind of stuff. Um, First off, with his actual stats, he is a 3-speed, 4 armor, so he's a good middle of the road on both ends. A little bit leaning more towards the tankier side for armor, so he can take more of a frontal blow or kind of stand in front of the team a little bit while leading. So if any kind of enemies kind of jump in the way there, I mean, he's able to kind of take one for the team and get hit a couple times. So overall, he's more or less like a meat shield if you want to run that. But his main gadget is the EE-1D drone. It is the drone that you see in Rainbow Six Siege. When you activate it, any kind of enemies that are moving around will be highlighted. So it works a little bit different in Rainbow Six Siege than it does here. So the EE-1D drone here is like the very first version of Lion. So as you guys know, Lion has been nerfed into the ground so many times by Ubisoft in normal Rainbow Six Siege. If you use them in Rainbow Six Siege when enemies are moving around, all you see are little like red pings, every periodically, every time they move. So we'll scan them over and over again until that whole drone is done with its whole sweep. For this one, it actually makes it to where you can actually see an entire red outline of enemies through walls, regardless if they're moving or not. So you're able to see enemies in a really good range. So I think at the very end on level 10, it's up to 45 meters of range. So you can almost cover the entire map to see where all enemies are. So he is extremely good when it comes to getting intel, and extremely good in Maelstrom protocol, or the ranked gameplay, or the ranked mode in this game, if he's available for the lineup. So if he is on there for any kind of ranked gameplay, I recommend getting him and playing him, because he's extremely valuable in that. Outside of that, and playing normal matches, I mean, you can still get use out of him, but it's not really that crazy. It's nothing really super fun to use his gadget in any way. His passive ability is Stronger Recovery on the bottom right. You revive with an additional 30 health boost. So anyone picking you up, or if you revive yourself with a med kit or anything like that, you'll get revived with another 30 health. Or passive health anyway, the basic one. Or not the basic, the stem shot extra health that you normally get from like Docker med kits. So you'll be getting that. For advancements, let's go over. So this is the preview for the actual drone highlighting people. As you can see, they highlight in red, and you're able to shoot through the walls. Obviously, you know where their head and stuff are, or stuff is on the other end of the wall or any kind of surface. So you're able to shoot for the weak points and kill them. So you can activate it. It doesn't alert any kind of enemies or anything like that, so they don't know they're being scanned. And he's really great for, lighting enemies up through walls. So instead of using your UV flashlight that only has a limited range of seeing enemies through walls, you can use this and shoot through walls and stuff and kill enemies on the other end without being spotted, and makes stealth way easier. Combine this with Vigil, and you have one heck of a combo. Arsenal 3, you get the HK-417 marksman rifle and the P9 handgun. The level 4, you get the speed 3 upgrade, so you have increased 25% speed. Stronger recovery, you have the passive ability, the arsenal update, the SG CQB shotgun. Level 7, the detection duration increased to 30 seconds, so it has a whole 30 seconds of scanning, or it takes an entire like 30 seconds of constant scanning enemies, and the cooldown is reduced to 50 seconds. I don't really remember how long it took for the original cooldown was. I think it's 60 or 70 seconds, so it's not really by a whole lot, but it is a reduction. Armor 4, incoming damage reduced by 30%, so you can't really go wrong with that. Level 9, you have the F2 assault rifle, and then finally level 10. So cooldown reduced to 40 seconds, so you can always pop this thing every less than a minute, every single 40 seconds, so it's actually really constant. And detected enemies become scanned, so not only that you'll be scanning them during the duration of the scan, but afterwards when you're done scanning them, they will stay highlighted in red, so you can always continuously and permanently paint these guys in red, so you're able to see them. So he is the ultimate enemy location intel operator. So he's more of the chunkier, standing in front of it, teammates and stuff, kind of leading the way and highlighting a bunch of enemies, making it a lot easier for you to get stealth kills or shooting through walls behind cover. So you're able to get a lot more lines of sight and creativity on how you place yourself in positioning. So he is really flexible, and you can get a large amount of use out of him. But you just got to learn how to actually use his drone and get the most out of his whole ability there. And how I would run him, he is more of a stealth kind of operator, so I do run paralysis grenades, probably explosive harness if you want to, or if you want to, you can run the revive kit. You can actually use his passive ability to your advantage here, so you can run a revive kit, revive yourself, and it gives you like 10-20 health plus the 30 that you get when you revive yourself, and you get back up pretty much with a little bit over, or actually exactly 50 health, so you get back up with half health, so it's not too bad at all. Explosives, I run paralysis grenades or either smoke grenades, anything to help you out in stealth, since that is more or less how he's supposed to be played, so paralysis grenades is what I run on there. So overall, he's a really awesome operator. He was one of the last operators I did get the level 10 though. I didn't really use him a whole lot, but he's very underrated. And for beginners, all you have to do is click a button for this. You don't really need any kind of other skill to aim it at any kind of enemies, or do extra effort in order to actually get his gadget to work right. All you do is just click the activation button and does the rest for you. So for new beginners or people that are just a little bit more on the lazy end, you can use him, and you'll be helping out your team a ton without really doing anything at all. So overall, he's a real flexible and great operator to pick. Let me know what you guys think about it down in the comments, or do you use him, or do you think another operator does his job better in any kind of way? And if so, let me know why down in the comments. And aside from that, guys, I don't really have anything else to really show on him. And that's pretty much the entire whole deal for the arsenal, all his advancements, like everything that we already covered, his whole gadget, passive ability, anything like that. And he's just really good. He's like up there with like IQ, kind of serving the same role when it comes to intel in the same way, or pulse, but he's more of like the tankier end. Because you see for IQ, she's a 2 armor, 5 speed operator. Pulse is a 5 speed, 3 armor. This guy is a 3 speed, 4 armor. So he's supposed to be more like the tankier not detective, or like intel gatherer. So this is kind of role, and all around you really can't go wrong with them. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.